Unit 8, page 65. Listening skills. Exercise 4. You will hear some students discussing an assignment about zoos. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 5.
Hello, Brenda. How are you doing?
Fine. I've just come over to talk about this assignment on the function of zoos. Oh, hello, Charles.
Hello, Brenda. That's good. I've just been in the library looking at some stuff. I think Adrian's been on the web.
Yes, I have.
Well, that's great. What have you found out about zoos?
I've been looking into the history both of zoos and of keeping animals generally.
I didn't think we had to do that.
Yes, it was one of the topics we had to research. We definitely need to cover it, even if only briefly, I think. After all, people have kept animals for recreation and pleasure for centuries. The ancient Egyptians kept collections of animals, and of course the Romans kept animals for recreation.
Ah, the Romans. That brings us to the general question of the treatment of animals and the mistreatment of them.
Yes, but that's not our topic. We've been told to keep off that. Now, where were we?
Our assignment is concerned with the purposes of zoos in general and in our modern era. We have to cover the history, but not in great depth. Our main focus is the scientific aspects of zoos and the work they do for conservation and so on.
We mustn't forget the question of who pays for them. Zoos are hugely expensive places to run nowadays. There are the costs of feeding the animals, obviously, and security for the animals and the public. What happens if they escaped and so on? We have to ask what benefits we get from this.
Adrian, I don't think you'll find we have to do that kind of thing at all.
But I've been looking into all that and the social benefits of zoos.
What I mean is, that's not part of this assignment. All this financial and safety stuff is not necessary. We should stick to their purposes. Now, what have you found out, Charles?
Well, I discovered that the World Association of Zoos and Aquariums was very helpful on this. I've got their website address here somewhere. I found out about the scientific research that zoos do. The other thing we should cover is the educational side of their work.
The educational side is pretty obvious. I've got lots of stuff here about this and more references to websites and information. There's also the area of entertainment. What about that?
He's got a point. I think we need to do some more research on that.
Fine, but it sounds like we've covered the history and science angles pretty well.
I agree. Let's leave those for now and plan some more study on the entertainment stuff.
And let's do some more work on the conservation element.
Unit 8, page 65. Listening skills. Exercise 6. Now answer questions 6 to 10.
Oh yes, the Arabian oryx is a classic case.
The what?
The Arabian oryx. It's like a deer, but white. That is, it has a white body, but brown legs, and long curved horns. It normally lives in the hot desert in the Arabian Peninsula. Anyway, in the 70s, the population declined, and in 1972, the last wild oryx was shot and it became extinct in the wild. There were a few left in zoos in the United States where there was a captive breeding program. This was so successful that in 1982, a small population was reintroduced into the wild. Hunting of wild animals was made illegal, and there are now about 300 in Oman.
Oh,
Although there was a big problem there, I believe. The population went up to about 450 in the 90s, and then illegal hunting did take place. The population crashed again, and the programs had to be restarted. But that's been successful, and there are now, I believe, as you say, several hundred in the wild. This is all available on the websites that Adrian has noted.
There was a similar program in Saudi Arabia, and I think there are hundreds in the desert there now.
we can use that as a definite success story.
And what have you found out?
Yes, what have you come up with?
I'm going to the library now.
Good. Unit 8, page 67. Speaking skills. Exercise 5. Speaker 1.
Yes, I did, although in fact I wouldn't call him a pet exactly. Rover was our guard dog, but he had a peculiar way of guarding the house. We had burglars twice, and on each occasion he didn't bark or attack the burglars. He ran out of the house to the neighbour's house and barked at their front door. Both times they called the police and the burglars were caught. So, in his way, he was an excellent guard dog.
Speaker 2.
Like most parrots, he was very colourful. I'm not really sure if a parrot is a real pet. They're not very friendly or affectionate. Anyway, he spoke very little, but when he did...
Speaker 3.
My favourite pet animal was Lassie. Really, of course, he wasn't my pet at all, but I loved him. I had lots of books about him, and of course I watched the television programs whenever I could. I thought he was wonderful.
Unit 8, page 67. Speaking skills. Exercise 5. Speaker 1.
Yes, I did, although in fact I wouldn't call him a pet exactly. Rover was our guard dog, but he had a peculiar way of guarding the house. We had burglars twice, and on each occasion he didn't bark or attack the burglars. He ran out of the house to the neighbour's house and barked at their front door. Both times they called the police and the burglars were caught. So, in his way, he was an excellent guard dog.
Speaker 2.
Like most parrots, he was very colourful. I'm not really sure if a parrot is a real pet. They're not very friendly or affectionate. Anyway, he spoke very little, but when he did...
Speaker 3.
My favourite pet animal was Lassie. Really, of course, he wasn't my pet at all, but I loved him. I had lots of books about him, and of course I watched the television programs whenever I could. I thought he was wonderful.
Unit 8, page 69. Exam listening. Section 4. You will hear part of a lecture on wildlife. Listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
Thousands of exotic plants and animals have been introduced into the British Isles over thousands of years. These newcomers compete with native species for resources and can also cause major changes in the wildlife and in the habitats of our countryside. The problem is not just British, of course, but global, and it has been going on for centuries. One good example of this I'd like to mention today is the European starling. The starling to us in the UK is a fairly ordinary little bird, about 12 inches long. In flight, it appears to be black or grey with tiny white spots. So it's a very ordinary-looking, almost dirty-looking bird. It nests in trees and buildings and can be found in the country and in towns. It travels in large flocks, leaving the nests in the morning and returning in the early evening. It feeds on insects and fruit. Its native range includes the British Isles and Finland, but it is also found in most of Europe and parts of Asia and Africa. In the British Isles and Finland, however, it has suffered a huge decline, and in these countries there is an effort to conserve the species. It is a different story in some of the places where it has been introduced. For example, the population in the USA is estimated at 170 million birds. Also, they are becoming a big problem in Australia and New Zealand. Starlings, as I have said, nest in trees, and it has been found that they are more aggressive than native species, native that is to Australia and New Zealand, when they are looking for nesting places. They therefore compete with native species for nests, and also they drive those species away from nests. So, this nest-building activity causes harm to native species, but also they are a nuisance to humans. They gather in large flocks of thousands of birds and feed together on commercial crops. This causes great financial damage to farmers. And they also make a mess, both in the town and the countryside. There is also the problem that starlings may carry diseases which affect both humans and other animals, although this has not been really confirmed and we are waiting for more work to be done on this. The question arises, what are we to do about foreign species which not only do damage to native species but interfere with human activity? We have 3 approaches in theory, but usually it is not a free choice between them. Usually we have to do the best we can and that money will allow. The best approach, of course, is prevention, and many countries have passed legislation which attempts to limit or prevent the arrival of non-native species in their countries. In particular, there are many international regulations on how and where ships may pick up and deposit water, and this is a major contribution to preventing the accidental transport of fish and organisms by ship, since accidental transport by ship is a frequent cause of fish and other creatures going from place to place. Ports also have special areas where water can be deposited, and many of them have treatment facilities to kill any foreign species that may establish themselves in their waters. For fish and organisms that live in water, these international regulations are useful, but obviously not all species can be dealt with in this way. Sometimes it is simply too late for prevention. Then we have to consider eradication or management. By management, I mean that we have to decide how best to live with the new creatures and how to keep their numbers down. However, this becomes not only a scientific question, it can be a matter of choice what population level of an invasive species we want to maintain. This choice involves costs. There is the cost of living with the species, and there is the cost of managing the species over time, and species management is usually a long-term business without any foreseeable end. However, there is not just the economic aspect to this question. We can also consider the ethical point. How should we treat animals which we have, sometimes deliberately, introduced into the environment? Is it permissible just to exterminate a number of them convenient to ourselves? The most important decision has to be made in the political forum, whatever considerations go into the making of that decision. These questions are relevant also to the approach of eradication, which is another option, but which does not have an encouraging history. Many attempts have been made to eradicate introduced species.